Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, How to Administer Wellness Programs in Today's Regulatory Environment. My name is Allison, and I will be your moderator today. A few housekeeping items before we get started. If you missed something, don't worry. We'll be emailing you the recording with the slides after the webinar concludes. I'll be keeping the webinar muted to avoid any background noise. We'll pause for questions. Simply type your question in the box below and I'll read it aloud for you. If we don't get to your question today, we will be sure to email you a response. Today we will be exploring what rules remain after the EEOC's regulations were found invalid, and will provide guidance on what rules must be met in 2019 in order to offer a valid wellness program. ERISA attorney Larry Grugin is our presenter today. With more than 35 years' experience in employee benefit law, Larry has a wealth of experience in dealing with qualified plans, health and welfare, fringe benefits, and executive compensation areas. Thank you for joining us today, Larry. We are delighted to have you. With that, I will now hand it over to you to get started.
Thank you very much. When a client comes to me and wants to install a wellness program, I basically go through this presentation to make sure they understand all the issues that are incumbent in having a well-rounded wellness program. And one thing is important to understand: wellness programs can take various shapes and sizes as we go through today, so you understand. But when you are considering a wellness program, one thing you have to remember is that there are a number of issues that you have to confront and you have to look at to see what the impact of these various laws are. There's very detailed regulations on HIPAA. These rules came out in 2006 and then later were changed in 2013. They stay in place. You'll have to contend yourself, if you're going to give a benefit to your employee, you have to consider whether that benefit is taxable. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, but you got to be real careful and consider, if you're going to give cash, whether that cash is going to be taxable to the employees. Depending on the design of the wellness program, you may have to consider ERISA. What does that mean? You may have to do a plan document, an SPD, and you may have to do notices, because if you have a very robust wellness program, it may be considered to be a medical program under ERISA. So therefore, all the rules that apply to medical plans would apply to your wellness program. Now, recently there were regulations. The EEOC had come out with GINA and ADA. And in 2017, a district court found those regulations were invalid. And what was interesting about the court decision is the EEOC couldn't justify the decisions they made in the regulations. And so the court decided that even though they were invalid, they're going to be valid to the end of 2018. And right now, those regulations have been withdrawn. And we don't know, in this sense, what the EEOC is going to do about the enforcement of GINA and ADA. Under Obama administration, they're very aggressive in suing employers for violations of GINA and ADA under wellness programs. A number of different employers were sued. Under Trump, that's been different. They backed off in that. So it's going to be interesting what EEOC is going to come out with new regulations for those areas. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to speculate and do a general discussion of how GINA and ADA comes into play, and hopefully when you're designing your programs, you can avoid any traps in regard to that. And then next, I'll be talking about, if you adopt a wellness program, what tripwires are there under ACA? It could affect your grandfather status. That's one thing that I'll be discussing. Excuse me. And secondly, it could actually affect the affordability determination for the employer mandate. So you have to be very cognizant of how your wellness program affects the premium amounts for that situations. And then I'll take your questions, but again, all throughout the presentation, if you have a question, make sure you look at the different look down here at your right, and there's a question tab there at the dashboard. So make sure you type in your question, and I've been indicating that if you have a question, we'll answer it as soon as possible. So let's look at the wellness program requirements under HIPAA. Basically, group health plans and insurers cannot discriminate against participants on the basis of health factors. And under HIPAA, you can't, if somebody overuses your plan, you can't deny them enrollment, you can't increase their waiting periods, you can't reduce their benefits. Also, you can't, because of a health condition, you can't charge people more for premiums or contributions. So you have to be very careful in that regard when you're designing your programs. The only exception to that, and that's why the different governmental agencies produce regulations, the exception that was designed under the law, under the regulations, if you meet certain requirements, wellness programs are an exception to that. So what you can do is build in, if you meet the regulations, either higher premiums or lower premiums, depending if you have certain type of wellness programs. Extremely important to understand. So there is an exception, but you have to meet the regulations. So remember that violations of HIPAA non-discrimination rules result in a code-based excise tax of $100 per day, DOL audit and civil actions to enforce those rules, and there could be private action by a participant under the 502 rules under ERISA. So again, there are penalties if you violate those rules. So if you violate and your plan has seen that it's not complying with the regulations, this is what the government can hold over you in that regard. So in the regulations that came out in 2013, wellness programs were divided into two groups. One group was what's called health contingent programs. What is a health contingent program? A health contingent program is basically you have to meet certain requirements to get a reward. You have to score at various, stop smoking, for example, or you have to score at various levels on your health risk assessment in order to qualify for certain benefits. So that's a more sophisticated program. But you as an employer can set those standards and say, you have to, for example, we're going to have an exercise program. You have to show evidence of the fact you walked X amount per week, you exercised X amount per week, that type of thing. So that's a more sophisticated wellness program that you as an employer could institute. What many employers do at first, though, is called a participation-only program. And this simply rewards participation in the program regardless of whether individual satisfies the health contingent standard. So you could give individuals money if they just attend things, if they just get a health risk assessment, because the problem with some people is that they may not have gone to the doctor for years and they're afraid to go to the doctor. Well, this paying them to have a health risk assessment could be the first step in a program. And if you do that, they say, we're not going to look at your results. Only you look at the results. But if you get this health risk assessment that we pay for, we're going to give you X amount of money to do this. But we won't base any of the program on what the results are of that program. So as this slide indicates, is that if you're going to do a more sophisticated program, the regulations have 5 requirements that you have to meet in order to be that meet the regulations. And I'll be going over what those requirements are in the next few minutes. While the participation program is looser and much less requirements in that, and the only requirement if you can do a participation-based program is you basically the program has to be available to all similarly situated individuals. Now that doesn't mean everybody, it just means you can't just do it for the executives. You could do it for a division, a location, you could do it hourly versus salaried, you could do it that way, but it just can't be for a few individuals. For example, you set up a cancer program. If you deal with cancer and the only person that has cancer is the president of the company, that wouldn't fly. All right, so it's got to be more of a broad-based program in order to meet the requirements. But again, the regulations, the regulations do give you a lot of latitude in designing your programs. And here, as this slide indicates, wellness programs can take many forms. It might even be called not be called a wellness program. But in defining feature is usually reward or encourage healthier lifestyles, reducing premiums or co-pays in exchange for quitting smoking or reducing bad cholesterol levels. Employers and insurers can hope by encouraging healthier lifestyles, healthcare costs can be contained. That's been the mantra for the past 20 years when these were first introduced back in the 90s. So an HHS has recommended that employers consider providing health promotion or wellness programs and disease management programs for employers as part of the health benefits. And some insurance companies have actually included this in their health plans. Now, what a basic design of this program, many wellness programs also have what's called disease management, because it's been discovered many times that people have chronic conditions. One of their issues is making sure they take care of those conditions, because if they don't, it could cost an employer a ton of money. So to encourage these people to take care of themselves, they could encourage them, so for example, chronic condition like asthma or diabetes, make sure they take their medicine, make sure they go to the doctor. So for that, a program may provide case managers that will help monitor compliance with medication protocols and schedule appointments with physicians and therapists and special education opportunities, newsletters, and discounts. So an employee could be rewarded just for maintaining their chronic conditions. And that has shown that it can actually save employer money by encouraging employees to do so. And then the first thing you have to decide when you're designing this program is what kind of rewards you're going to have. Are you going to give out just t-shirts and water bottles? Or are you going to actually get serious about this and actually significant reductions in premiums, co-pays, or deductibles to encourage people to get healthy? And also, in addition, it said health contingents necessary to qualify for rewards vary greatly from actually quitting smoking and lowering cholesterol to merely attending smoking cessation programs. And this comes into play if you're going to a health contingent move from a participation-based program to actually a health contingent, where you're saying it's not enough just to show up. What you have to do is actually score at various levels on your health risk assessment in order to satisfy reward. And that's when it gets a little more complicated, and you have to have professionals run your program to make sure you monitor it carefully. The keystone to all these programs is the health risk assessments, or HRAs. And these programs can be just a few blood draws, or it could be asking employees to actually get a physical exam every year. So as this slide indicates, health risk assessments are used by wellness programs to identify individuals who benefit the most from wellness programs and represent the greatest opportunities for cost containment. Their theory is that by early detection, you can spot certain diseases. In addition, health risk assessments can be used by plan participants and beneficiaries to identify areas of possible concern and set health-related goals. And this is tricky because the fact that you have to make sure that enough of your employees take these health risk assessments to make it worthwhile. And again, many employers in this situation, what they may do is they may actually pay the employee, pay for the health risk assessment, and give them cash in order to take the exam. So, and again, as an employer, one of the decisions you have to make in this situation is health risk assessments can be much more hands-on and can range from basic screenings, blood pressure, cholesterol, body mass, blood sugar, and bone density, to a complete physical. So it's up to you and your consultants who are you're going to be consulting on this exactly what that health risk assessment will contain. And often the initial, and this is an important statement right here, often the initial HRA, health risk assessment, is used as a baseline in which subsequent assessments are measured to track progress to health-related goals. And especially if you're doing a health contingent program, This is where the program is set, and this is what you want to do is use that and the numbers that you initially get in order to see improvement. But again, and this statement is also extremely important, an employer cannot make taking health risk assessments mandatory to receive coverage. You can penalize an employee for not taking it, but you can't deny them coverage. Extremely important to understand that. So again, wellness programs that do not condition eligibility for reward let's see here, just a second here. Okay. So wellness programs that do not condition eligibility for rewards upon ability to meet certain conditions are participation programs. And as I said before, there are various examples of these participation-only programs. You could be initiatives to participate in the healthcare or testing, waiver of copays or deductibles for well baby visits, reimbursement of healthcare memberships, reimbursement for smoking cessation program. And again, what these programs are saying is we encourage you to participate in these programs. And if you attend these programs, if you attend a smoking cessation program, you don't have to actually quit smoking. But if by attending it, we're going to give you X amount, we're going to give you a benefit by doing it. So a program that rewards employees who complete a health risk assessment without any further action, again, is an example of a participation-based program. And this is an area where many employers start a wellness program to get the employees introduced to this area and get enough employees to actually complete the health risk assessment. The next step in this is called the health contingent programs. They require employees to satisfy you as an employer self a health contingent standard related to a health factor as a condition for rewarding for obtaining the rewards. And this could be, the reward could be cash, it could be premium discount, it could be a waiver of cost sharing amount, any additional financial or other incentive. Now, what many employers do, and it's up to you, is that they structure this as a discount as opposed to a penalty. There's some employers that actually schedule this as a penalty. If you don't do this, participate in the program, you're going to be charged more instead of designing it as a discount. So it's up to you how you're going to design the plan. You could design it in either way, either as a, everybody pays $100, but if you participate in the program, you're going to be only charged $90 or $80. And that's the way that many employers structure these programs. They structure it as a positive discount by participating. Now, these health contingent programs are divided into two different groups. Activity-only programs require individuals to complete an activity. You could, for example, institute an exercise program. You have to show evidence to the fact, and they give certain monitors to employees to show that the fact that they're actually walking or any type of exercise program so many days a week. And if you do complete that, you'll get a reward. Other types of programs are out-based programs require individuals to obtain or maintain specific health outcomes in order to reward. So this is, for example, reward for not smoking, for obtaining a certain result in the biometric screening, or maintaining a certain body mass index. So you as an employer, through a consultant, can come up with a program that meets your, for example, if you see at a certain location or a certain group of employees are suffering from diabetes and overweight, you can target those employees and say, if you participate in this exercise and outcome-based program, we're going to give you rewards to do so. So we want to reduce your risk, and that's the best way, I think, to structure this. Now, each health contingent program must meet 5 requirements. to be exempt from the HIPAA non-discrimination. So if you don't meet these 5 requirements, you're deemed to have violated the non-discrimination rules, and that's where those penalties that we mentioned will come into play here. Okay, so the reward must not be more than 30% of the cost of coverage, and depending on who you allow to participate, it could be single or family, depending on who's eligible. The program must be reasonably designed to promote health and prevent disease. The program cannot be used to give a reward to certain individuals, for the executives. The program must give individuals an opportunity to qualify for a reward at least once a year. So you can't say to an employee, well, if you don't stop smoking now, or in the next 6 months, you're never going to get the benefit. You have to allow them to reapply, and again, this is a good thing because the fact that people may lose weight and then gain it back, and you want to give them an opportunity to be able to go back into the program and qualify again. The reward must be available to all similarly situated individuals, and that means it has to be a broad group of individuals, but it doesn't have to be everyone. It can be just employee participants. It can be a location, or it can be a group of employees, for example, hourly employees or salaried employees. And this is the most troublesome part of this, and I'll be talking about each one. The plan must disclose alternative health contingents. In other words, I can't quit smoking, I'm addicted. What can I do to qualify for this discount? And to say to the employee, okay, what you have to do is attend a smoking cessation program. So you'll get the reward even if you don't quit smoking, but you have to attend a smoking cessation program, and if you do that, you'll get the reward. So you have to come up with an alternative. For example, if you have an exercise program, an employee says, I'm disabled, I can't do X and Y. Well, what else do you have for me so I can qualify for the discount? And if no other alternative exists, then what you have to do is waive for a particular employee, is waive that requirement and have them qualify for the discount. So the reward must not be more than 30% of the cost of coverage. And again, depending on who's eligible, it's the total premium. And if only the employee is eligible to participate, so it's 30% of the single, and it's up to that level, so you can do 10, 20, 30%. So it's based on the total premium, not what the employee pays. So what you're doing is, suppose the employee usually pays 80% of the premium, and now you're going to reduce it so the employee pays maybe 90% or 100% of the premium for those who participate in the program. That basically just what you're committing in effect by doing this discount, you're going to be paying more of the premium. Now, the exception to that is the next slide, is the fact that if you have a smoking cessation program, what this slide indicates the fact that the law allows you to go from 30 to 50% of the premium. Now, that's the upper limit. So this is just for the smoking cessation program. So all others are at 30%. The smoking cessation part can be as high as 50%. But again, if just only the employee is eligible to participate, then you base it on the single premium rate. If the whole family is eligible, then you base it on the family rate. It's up to you who you want to be eligible. And there are issues when you include the family. Suppose the employee cooperates and enters the program and meets the standards, but the wife doesn't, or vice versa. What do you do in that? Is it all or nothing? Do both people have to qualify and meet the standards, or just one or the other? I mean, these are things that employees and employers are wrestling with. You have to be very clear when you roll this out. And again, the program must be reasonably designed to promote health and prevent disease. The program meets this requirement. It has a reasonable chance of improving health. It's not overly burdensome. It's not a subterfuge for discriminating based on a health factor, and it's not overly suspect in the method chosen to promote health or prevent disease. what this means in layman's language is you should make it so at least a vast majority of your employees do qualify for the benefit. If you make it too onerous and very few people qualify, it's going to be a suspect. So you have to be very careful in designing this program so more people actually qualify for the discount. So there's no need for scientific record that is chosen and promotes, and the requirement is intended to be easy to satisfy and prohibits bizarre, extreme, illegal requirements for the wellness program. There are examples in the final regulations. If you're interested, I can give you examples later if you're interested. But plans and issuers should do not feel constrained by relatively narrow range of programs described in the examples. So you have to be very careful. Use the examples and the regulations as a guide. But again, you could come up with something, and as long as it's not burdensome and many of your employees do qualify, you should be fine. So there is a bright line on health contingent that establishes minimum frequency of qualification, and the program could be more frequent. So what you could say each year at open enrollment, you take the health assessment, and that's when you have to qualify. Now what you can do, if somebody at the time of the open enrollment doesn't qualify, you can say, we're going to give you X period of time, 3, 4, 5 months to requalify. And if you requalify, then moving forward, we're going to give you the discount. So you're going to get another bite at the apple, but you must do that at least once a year. You can do more, you can do it more frequently, but you must do it at least once a year. And similarly situated individuals, what this means, as I indicated before, you must pick a group of employees. It doesn't have to be everyone. It could be a bona fide employment classification, full-time versus part-time, current employees versus former employees, different geographic locations. It could be a division of your company. If you see certain health factors that are in certain individuals, you could target those individuals and say, you know, we want to help you, especially if you have people that have chronic conditions in certain divisions or certain jobs. So these are things you have to decide, but the more people I think that are eligible, the better it is for your program. So again, the reward can be offered to a group of employees, not retirees, to a group from one location versus another. And again, there's nothing wrong with offering this program only to employees. You're not required, and most employers do not open it up to spouses and dependents. That's when you get complicated in trying to monitor exactly what all these individuals are doing. You may just open up first to employees and then decide, should I include the whole family? Now again, under outcome-based program, if an individual does not meet the requirement, you are under an obligation to come up with an alternative for them to meet the standard. And I gave the example before of a smoking cessation program where somebody comes to you and said, you know, my doctor has indicated to me that I'm severely addicted to tobacco, and I can't switch. I can't right now. I can't do so. Is there any other thing I can do to qualify? And as I indicated before, what you could do is say, okay, attend the smoking cessation program, and you're going to qualify for the benefit. So, I mean, these are things, and again, what the regulations have indicated is the fact that it's up to you how you, and it could be individual for each employees. So it means that both the general health contingent for grouping similarly must be satisfied, and a reasonable alternative generally must be provided. So, I mean, this is extremely important. An individual must be given an opportunity to comply with the recommendations of individual's personal physician. as a second reasonable alternative to meeting. And this also could be important, for example, for any type of exercise program where an employee comes to you and says, you know, I can't do certain things. Could I do something else? Instead of an exercise program, could I do something else? So here, under the outcomes-based program, it's not reasonable to require verification of a health factor that makes it unreasonable, difficult, or mentally inadvisable. However, if a reasonable alternative to an outcome-based program is an activity-based, then the plan must seek verification. And you can ask in that situation if they have an injury, get a doctor's note in regard to that. And again, as I indicated, the determination whether the plan has provided a reasonable alternative is all based on facts and circumstances. And the following factors, among others, should be given in account in determining whether the plan has provided a reasonable alternative. If a reasonable alternative standard is the completion of an educational program, the plan must make the educational program available or assist the employee in finding a program. And the time commitment required must be reasonable. From the regulations and reading the regulations, basically what they're requiring employers to do is almost custom make these alternatives to each employee. And that's, I think, of any part of this program, that's probably the most difficult part of the program, is finding out an alternative. And again, what the regulations indicate, if you can't find any alternative for that employee, you as an employer have a choice of saying, we're going to waive that requirement for you. So again, this is the most difficult part of the program, coming up with alternatives, especially if an employee can't do certain things. So if the reasonable alternative standard is a diet program, the plan is not, the individual is not required to pay for the cost of food, but must pay for any membership. If the individual's personal states that any plan standard is not medically appropriate for that individual, the plan must provide a reasonable alternative standard that accommodates the recommendations of the individual's personal physician with regard to medical appropriateness. So again, be very careful in designing your programs in that regard. And as I indicated before, the plans may always waive any, so if you've gone through 3 or 4, none of them work, as an alternative, you can actually waive those requirements. And again, you as an employer are not required to advertise the certain reasonable alternatives. Basically, what you must do is indicate they are available. If an employee wants to qualify, come in and we'll talk to you about that. So reasonable alternatives may be provided to a class of employees or on an individual by individual basis. And that's what many employers are grasping with. Now, the full reward under either the activity or outcomes based must be available to all similarly situated individuals. An individual who qualify for satisfying the reasonable alternative standard must provide the same full reward that is provided to individuals who qualify. And the same full reward must be provided even if it takes more time to request, establish, and satisfy the alternative standard. So again, these are things that either you or your consultant must monitor to make sure that who gets these rewards. And again, as I indicated before, the plan must disclose that alternative health contingents or waivers are available. But the regulations are very clear on this, that you don't have to advertise what those alternatives are, just the fact that they're available. Because these alternatives almost have to be custom made to each individual. And for outcome-based programs, a similar notice must be included in any communications that individual did not satisfy the outcome-based programs. If the plan materials merely mention the availability of wellness programs without describing terms, then a reasonable alternative does not need to be described in the plan material. So what I would do in this situation, anytime you have open enrollment, describe the fact that here are the standards, but a reasonable alternative is available. For details about those reasonable alternatives, please come and talk to us. So again, this is the area that most employers are grappling with. And also, it's going to be important, especially if you have a number of participants cannot meet the standards, and you want to encourage more and more people to qualify for the reward. Again, this is something you have to grapple with. Are there any questions?
No, Larry, this is just a reminder that please feel free to write your questions in the panel using the question box as you have them. You do not have to wait until the end. I will read them as they come in.
The next area I want to talk about is wellness programs and income tax. This is an area that many employers forget about, and especially if you're going to give your employees cash, that's where it gets rather troublesome. So a wellness program that does not qualify either as a eligible medical expense or a fringe benefit under Code Section 132 are considered taxable. So the question is, what does that mean? Well, if you're paying for certain medical procedures, if you're paying for the health risk assessment for the employee, that's not going to be taxable, okay? But if you give the employee $100 to take the health up above and beyond the health risk assessment, that $100 would be taxable. Also, if you give a discount to the employee, instead of paying a $100 premium, you discount it to $80. That $20 is not taxable. So let's look at this. So cash and non-cash incentives, payments and rewards paid to employee are not excludable from the employee's taxable income merely because they are paid under a wellness program. You have to find some semblance of where it can be reduced. So the purpose of income and employment taxes, the following items are included in the taxable income even if paid under a wellness program. Cash payments, even small amounts such as $10 or $25 for participation in a wellness program. Non-cash rewards, incentives other than benefits that are not medical care. For example, payment of gym memberships, unless based on facts and circumstances that would be a medical expense, which means the obese and that doctor has actually prescribed exercise. Payment or reimbursements through a wellness program to reimburse employees for all or portion of the premiums that the employee paid as a salary reduction. As an employee, as an employer, you can't do that, but by giving a discount, you avoid that. The following items are excluded from taxable income. Benefits, services, and non-cash rewards are incentives that are medical care defined under Code Section 213. So if you're paying for biometric screening, smoking cessation program, health risk assessments, clearly those are not taxable. Rewards or incentives that qualify as de minimis fringes under the Code Section 132. These are defined as property or services whose values are so small that accounting for them would be unreasonable or administratively impractical. An example would be t-shirts provided under a wellness program, water bottles, things like that, small value. That would be called a de minimis fringe. That's like giving out a Christmas turkey. Those things are not taxable to the employee. So again, in this situation, if you're giving cash to the employee, that's going to be taxable. But if you design the program as being a discount to the employee, instead of paying $100, they pay $80 instead of a reimbursement, that discount would not be taxable to the employee, and that's the way to design it. Wellness programs and ERISA. So are wellness programs subject to ERISA? It depends. As this slide indicates, to the extent the wellness program provides medical benefits, it will be likely to be treated as a group health plan under ERISA. What does that mean? And the only thing we have is a letter to an individual from 1993. The DOL indicated that a wellness program would be considered as providing medical care if it provides programs that are diagnostic or preventive or that coach for certain identified health risk factors. So for example, if you have programs in your wellness program that has disease management portions of it, combining the two together, that would be a medical plan under ERISA and would be considered a medical plan, and therefore you have to have a plan document, SPD, and meet all the other requirements. Wellness programs under GINA. This is somewhat easy to avoid. Underwriting purposes include charging deductibles to other cost-sharing mechanisms or providing discounts, rebates, or payments in kind or other premium differentials, such as completing a health risk assessment or participating in a wellness program. Family history or other genetic information can be collected if the purpose of the collection is neither underwriting purposes or is it prior or in connection with enrollment. If you're connecting it for treatment, for example, this would not be considered to be a violation of GINA. So genetic information includes the collection of family history. Any wellness programs that provides rewards for completing HRAs that request genetic information, including family and medical history, violates the prohibition against requesting genetic information for underwriting purposes. This is a result even if the rewards are not based on the outcome of this assessment. So you have to scrub your health risk assessments for this information. So genetic information can be collected as long as no rewards are provided. And a group health plan or health care can provide rewards for completing an HRA as long as this information is not provided. So you can easily avoid that. Now what happened is the EEOC issued final regulations in 2016 to apply to employers and clarify the offering of limited assessments under the Employer Wellness Program in exchange for information about the spouse's benefits and health conditions is permitted under certain conditions. The EEOC issued the regulations removing these incentive provisions and they were effective as of January 2019. A federal court had vacated the incentive provisions effective January 1st, 2019, holding that the EEOC had not justified its conclusion that 30% incentive was a reasonable interpretation of the term voluntary. Remember, what's important on this is these programs have to be voluntary, both on the sense of GINA and also ADA. So it's important to remember that the court order and the EEOC's regulations only affect the regulations or rules regarding the employer's ability to provide incentives. So far, as I indicated before, the EEOC has not proposed new regulations in this area. In regard to ADA, you have to be very careful here because wellness programs and needs management programs that require disabled individuals to participate in order to obtain benefits equal for those that are non-disabled might be found to be discriminatory under the ADA. Care must be taken in structuring wellness and disease management programs to ensure qualified individuals with disabilities have an equal access to program benefits, and especially if you have exercise programs that require greater obligations that are imposed upon qualified individuals with disabilities. This reasonable accommodation requirement applies to wellness programs, regardless of whether they include any disabled-related questions or medical exams. So again, you have to be very careful. And the ADA prohibits disease-related medical exams and inquiries subject to two exceptions. One exception is for job-related and consistent with business necessity. For example, if a job requires certain physical attributes. The other exception permits voluntary medical exams, including medical histories, which are part of the employee's health program. If that information obtained is maintained according to the confidentiality requirements of the ADA, which means you'd have to have a medical exam for a physical part of the job. If you do that, there's no problem. And you don't use it to discriminate against the employee. In May 2016, the EEOC issued final regulations that address the extent in which the employee health plan may offer incentives for participation. And the precise boundaries of an employee health plan are uncertain because the term is not defined under the ADA. As I indicated before, in December 2017, the court amended its prior decision, vacated the incentive provisions effective as of January 2019. The EEOC then removed the incentive section of the 2016, and so far we have no guidance at all, and they have not proposed any new regulations yet. So because the EEOC removal regulations do not address the status of any guidance, we don't know exactly how they're going to enforce this. And in August 2017, the court ruled that the EEOC had not justified the inclusion of 30% incentive, and the court left the regulations in place during 2018, but they're gone now. So as of January 1st, 2019, we don't have any other guidance. ACA. How is ACA affected? First of all, grandfather status. Remember, as part of the grandfather status, the employer contributions can't vary by more than 5 percentage points by the amount they were contributing as of March 23rd, 2010. So as an employer, if you're contributing 80% of the premium and you adopt a wellness program, and because of the way you adopted the wellness program and the penalties involved in the wellness program, now you're only paying 70% of the program because the fact the employee didn't qualify for the incentives. In that situation, then what you must do is that you lose grandfather status. So again, you have to be very careful, especially if an employee is 1 year they qualify, the next year they don't qualify. And you have to make sure that as of March 23rd, 2010, whatever percentage of the premium you paid there, that can't vary by more than 5 percentage points. So as of that date, March 23rd, 2010, you as an employer were contributing 80% of the premium. That cannot vary by more than 5 percentage points, so it cannot be lower than 75%. Extremely important to understand. The other part is the employer mandate. Remember, under the employer mandate for the B penalty, you as an employer must provide affordable minimum value coverage. And in 2019, the employee cannot pay more than 9.86% of either their wages, either their is determined under 2 safe harbors, either the W-2 safe harbor or the hourly safe harbor. So it cannot exceed that. So the IRS has proposed affordability. If you have a smoking cessation program, you base it on as if the person did qualify for the smoking cessation. So it's based on the lower premium. And if you have a other type of program, for example, a exercise or any type of outcomes-based program, it's based on if they didn't qualify. So you have to remember that when you're determining if you have a wellness program and how this is going to affect your determination of affordability and determining 9.86% and exactly what that premium is. So Alison, are there any questions?
No, there are not any questions at this time. I would encourage you to take, those of you on the phone with us, to take maybe a minute or so to type any questions that you may have. Then I'll go ahead and read them out.
Well, I can't think of a question now. The final slide is my contact information. If you think of a question after this seminar, you can email me, and I'm more than glad to answer your questions and design and maintenance of a wellness program. And just remember, as a final thought, that hopefully sometime during 2019, the EEOC is going to come out with new regulations in regard to GINA and in regard to ADA, so watch for those. That's going to be extremely important if they come out in 2019. So if there's not any other questions.
Actually, Larry, there are a few that have populated. So.
Oh, good. Okay.
In terms of similarly situated individuals, can it be limited to all those who participate in the employer's medical plan and not offered to employees who do not participate?
Sure. You could do a condition that you have to participate in the medical program. Absolutely.
Great. A few more here. If a disease management program is provided by the insurance carrier, then is it still subject to ERISA for the employer? Fully insured or self-funded?
If it's part of the medical program, that's already subject to ERISA. Only if it's a separate program would you have to make that determination. So if it's already part of the medical program, it's already subject to ERISA.
Great. I did get a question about sending participants the presentation. Absolutely. If you have registered for the webinar and attended, we will be sending the slides that you can download, as well as a link to the recording of this website so you can have for your files or share with others in your organization. And with that, Larry, I think we've answered the questions. I want to thank you again for joining us today.
Our next seminar is it April 19th?
16th.
16th, yep. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on COBRA issues. We're going to be talking about, in the administration of COBRA, those common issues that employers have in the administration of COBRA. So it's going to be I'll be talking about issues and problems and eligibility, notices, everything. So if you're administering, or if you have to offer COBRA, that's something you may want to listen in on, because we could be talking about an issue you're dealing with right now. So, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks again, and thanks to all who logged on and participated with us today.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your week. Bye.